Comrades, I think that Sarah should make the speech instead of me. I think we've had already a tremendous rally with a galaxy of speakers that shows the achievements of the Socialist Party and the Committee of a Workers' International. And what does these contributions demonstrate? That capitalism daily demonstrates the urgent necessity of socialism, the democratic planned reorganization of the productive resources of society, whether it be in the ravings of the spokespeople of capitalism like Trump, who we said, by the way, when he was elected within a couple of days, will be one of the greatest recruiters to socialism in the US and worldwide. Unconsciously, of course, which is most of the time with Trump. Capitalism gives these demonstrations of what their system is about, of rottenness, of barbarism, of increasing incapacity to solve the problems of the working class and of humankind. As a matter of fact, the future that is opening up is an even worse prospect for the millions of working people and the poor throughout the planet, of a new capitalist crisis that looms in the not-too-distant future after the devastating crisis of 2007, 2008. And what a marvelous poke in the eye for Trump was the results of the midterm elections. Don't be fooled by the analyses that said, well, he's partially escaped from the criticism and the judgment of the American people. It was, if you like, a mild blue wave. But he lost the popular vote by 7 to 8%. And that's the equivalent of a landslide in Britain if it was in a general election. He should be already under the cosh of a vacating power because of the damage that he's inflicted on working people. And how marvelous these midterm results were of the union buster in Wisconsin, who was beaten by the uprising of the working people of Wisconsin. Of the election of a number of self-proclaimed socialists. That's the music of the future of the US working class. And that is only the precursor to what will develop in the US of a mass party of the working class. This so-called recovery is marked by historically low and stagnant wages. In Britain, as you are all aware by now, worse than any situation for 200 years. The savaging of the NHS, doctors' appointments that are like gold dust, the obscenity of universal credit, which really is another term for universal poverty of broad sections of the working class. Which even the Tories have described, some of them at least, as being cruel. Who could have read the report in the Daily Mirror of a couple of days ago of a 9-year-old child who'd lost their mother who died, whose father had a heart attack and phoned up a charity begging for work. She'd work after hours. She would work at weekends. That's the situation of the very poorest in Britain at the present time. It is absolutely disgraceful and it can't go on. And the Labour movement cannot allow this situation to go on. Of a youth in Cornwall living in a tent. That's the situation in this year of capitalism itself. This oligarchy that controls this society, for that is what it is. A tiny handful of about 8 men controlling 50% of the world's wealth. I was astonished the other day when I read in The Guardian that Joseph Stiglitz has produced new figures to show 3 people in the US control more wealth than the bottom 50% of the US population. This is a thin veneer of democracy to hide the iron grip, the power that they exercise over humankind and over society. You've heard many times at this meeting and others about our indictment of capitalism, of the litany of the crimes of this system. The question that's posed before us is what to do about it. This, of course, implies an analysis, because the very defenders of the system themselves, Theresa May, are actually looking over their shoulder because the system is being challenged and questioned by millions of working people today. When you get a footballer, a very good footballer, like Neville Southall, who happened to play for Everton, no interruptions, my time is precious, who can say that he supports Corbyn right down the line, at least he tells the truth. That's an indication of layers who never supported the Labour movement and a change are moving against this system. The middle class's lifestyle that they've enjoyed in the past will never be enjoyed by their children. No home, no decent job with a living wage, that will be out of the reach of the broad sections of the middle class. This is the new normal for British capitalism. Hence May's attempt to give the system a facelift, allegedly was to see the back of austerity. What a load of hogwash. The cuts will still cascade down on local councils in particular. You all know the situation. We had a marvellous discussion in the Commission today which gave a visible expression in every area of the terrible cuts in the living standards of working people itself. If the Tory government is compelled to make partial retreats on universal credit, if it's compared to the poll tax by John Major, by other figures like Owen Jones, who even went on record and praised the action of the Anti-Poll Tax Federation in a Guardian article and said you're going to get a poll tax, but never once mentioned the role of militants, even though his parents were members of our party. Therefore, I pursued the habit of a lifetime and wrote to the Guardian, in which I pointed out that the successful anti-poll tax movement was led not by the trade union leaders, not by that sellout Neil Kinnock, but by militants who organized 18 million people not to pay. 35 comrades were jailed, including Dave Nellist, who's speaking at the rally tomorrow, who refused to pay the poll tax and who was scandalously removed undemocratically as a Labour MP for refusing to pay the poll tax. Of course, The Guardian, that great upholder of liberal free speech, never published our letter. Nevertheless, we have the edge over them because we consigned Thatcher to the dustbin of history by the victory over the poll tax. We'd also repeated that earlier in the immortal battle of the heroic 47 comrades in the 1980s. And you know, you cannot stop the truth from coming out. Dawn Butler, a front bench Labour spokesman, when the Labour Party conference was taking place in Liverpool, blurted out, by the way, we're here in this city, and their slogan was to break the law rather than break the poor. The reward from the workers of Liverpool is an abiding, heroic status of those brothers, those comrades, for their achievement. I was interviewed last week by an old foe of ours in Liverpool. I won't give his name. And he complained I'd attacked him in my book, The Rise of Militantism, the book of myself and Tony Mulhern. And he said to me, "What's your secret, Peter? Because since I've left Liverpool, I've looked at what happened and how did a small group like you, of what, 50 people, how did you win such a position in Liverpool and nationally?" He was, by the way, he wasn't a Scouser, but he had the nous of a Scouse when he looked at the way that our party had developed in Liverpool at that stage. And I said, it's very simple. We had a clear program. We were unflinching in fighting for that program. We connected that program to the idea of a socialist change in society, armed, of course, with a perspective. We worked where the workers were, in the broad organizations, which is what the Labour Party were at that particular moment in time, particularly in the youth section of the Labour Party. And we had an enormous effect on the movement of the working class. What distinguishes this party, what distinguishes our comrades in Spain, is an ability not just to mouth phrases, to be windbags in the socialist cause, but to connect the ideas of socialism and Marxism to the movements of the working class, of a small cog that moves the bigger cog of the labour movement, which in turn moves millions of working people into action. They witch hunted us. They drove us out. Aren't they doing the same kind of thing, or trying to do that, to Jeremy Corbyn in an outrageous 3-year campaign of attempted coups that is worthy of Central and Latin America rather than the labour movement itself? This has been organised by the right, which we call the backstabbing tendency. The only reason they have not launched yet a new right-wing so-called centre party is that they have no confidence that this bird will take flight. They cannot repeat in the modern era the example of the SDP, in which they tried to split the Labour Party. One of the components of such a party would be the Liberal Party. After all, they're so moth-eaten, is Vince Cable, that they're advertising for a new leader of the Liberal Party at the present time. You could become the leader of the Labour Party if you apply for the job. We had big differences with the left that developed at that stage of momentum, where their idea was you had to pursue a gentle policy of persuasion. We said you will never remove this cancer from the labour movement without mandatory reselection. Mandatory reselection, John Lansman said to us, that's not on. It's the policy of peaceful persuasion. We said Corbynism without mandatory reselection is like a knife without a blade. The right will never go. They will sabotage. I have a litany here of what's happened in the last 3 years of the campaign against Corbyn. It does not make for pretty reading. And yet it's still not resolved the direction of the labour movement itself. In fact, the defeat of mandatory reselection at the Labour Party conference, with the existence of a trigger ballot, means that the right are still in situ in the Labour Party itself. That's very dangerous for the future of the Labour Party itself. Because a Labour government, if it comes to power, and the mass of working people want to see the back of this government, it's a question, it's hanging by a thread. This government could collapse at any moment. In one family, the Johnsons, not the most attractive of couples, I admit, but in one family you see the dilemma of the ruling class. One is for Remain, one is for staying, and yet they can agree to get rid of Theresa May. It's possible that a general election could be forced within a matter of weeks. And our answer is not a new referendum. We're opposed to the capitalist EU. because it's a neoliberal measure against the working class of the working class. But the answer is not narrow nationalism, but to come out for a socialist and an internationalist approach. There's a yearning by the mass of people in Britain to see the end of this government, and a growing hostility to anything which stands in the way of an election government. But the mood is not a completely uncritical approach towards Corbyn or MacDonald. There's an impatience now, certainly amongst the advanced, more politically developed sections of the working class, who see prevarication at the top, of a capitulation to the right, which bodes very badly in the event of a Labour government coming to power. What is to stop the right then behaving as Ramsay MacDonald did in 1931, when the Labour government was stabbed in the back? They are a fifth column within the Labour Party itself. And the only way to counter them now is to build up a mass left wing on clear socialist and fighting programme. That's why we've applied to rejoin the Labour Party. If the Co-op can be in the Labour Party, then why can't we, with our history of struggle and of our approach towards the mass organisations? And I want to echo a point that Juan Ignacio raised in a different context. If you stand in the way of a mass movement, you will be rolled over. And there's enormous discontent amongst working people today, particularly at local level. In this commission we had today, we had one report after another of the way our comrades are leading campaigns at local level and getting victories. The victories were not over just Tory councils, they were over so-called Labour councils. You are the little butchers that are carrying through the programme of the big butchers in number 10 Downing Street. Get out of the way, or the working class will move against you. And of course, we want Corbyn to succeed in the general election. Let's make it clear from this platform tonight, we will support Corbyn and advocate a vote for Corbyn, probably not standing any candidates in general, if you like, in a general election. But that's something that will be gone into in a bit more detail tomorrow at the rally. But let's make one thing clear tonight to those of you who may not be there tomorrow. Such as the attacks on the conditions of working class people today, that if you go ahead with this programme of closing libraries, of the enormous effect, deleterious effect it's having on the schools, of all the other cuts that are taking place, it won't just be the Socialist Party. It'll be librarians. It'll be local government workers. It will be teachers who will be standing against you at local level, trying to defeat your cuts, and we will be there beside them, supporting them in that struggle. I want to make two quick points before I finish, and that is towards the epic struggle that is developing and is going to develop on a higher plane in the US in the next period. This is going to be one of the classic situations of Labour movement history, because we can see the outlines of a mass movement developing that will create a mass party in the US. And one of the most visible signs of that was in the election of Sharma Savant in Seattle. I was there when she spearheaded the $15 an hour campaign. We said then at meetings like this $15 an hour will echo throughout the whole of the US like a prairie fire. And that's what has happened. Our small forces in Seattle have actually organized this movement. Now that, of course, has produced, that revolution in Seattle has produced a counter, if you like, counter-revolution or attempted counter-revolution, where you have Bezos, who managed to, I hope I'm not stealing the fire of Sharma. Bezos said to the city council, drop your taxes on my company, Amazon. What is Amazon? The richest country in the world, with the CEOs on the way to becoming not a billionaire, but a trillionaire. Probably the first trillionaire in the world. How obscene that you have that situation. But Bezos held a gun to the head of Seattle City Council and forced them to back down. I don't know what the present situation is. When we heard that, we said, well, it's a strategy of him to attack Sharma Savant. And we said, well, there's strategies and strategies. And you know the world heavyweight champion, what's his name? I'm going to say Frank's name. Tyson, that great theoretician, that studier of polls and the movements of the working class, once made a very profound point. He said, I've met many people who've had strategies, but the strategy disappears when you punch them in the mouth. And I say to Bezos, if you're listening here tonight, and who knows, you might have your people here, let's make it quite clear. In the campaign to re-elect Sharma Savant, we're intending to punch you in the mouth. Of course, figuratively speaking, because we are not terrorists. But we intend to organize an army and an international brigade as well that will defend Sharma Savant and the gains of the American working class. Comrades, socialism is knocking at the doors of history. This has been quite a tough period for us in Britain. It's different in the US. They don't move at the different speeds. How marvelous it is to hear Juan Ignacio describe the magnificent movements of the youth and the women in Spain. How marvelous it was in Ireland that our comrades participated and were instrumental in bringing down that terrible abortion situation that existed in Ireland. That's just a little taste of what is coming from the Socialist Party. We do not intend to be elbowed out of the way by any force within the Labour Party. If they don't let us in, we will still participate in the movement as we've done in the last 4 or 5 years. But the march of history shows you have to deal with an idea to defeat it. We are on the march. We have tomorrow the commemoration of the First World War. What a disgrace, the terrible suffering, summed up in the Willie McBride, the folk song. It happened again and again. That was the refrain in that song. And we say to all of those people looking at what is happening tomorrow in commemorating the First World War, it happened again 20 years later. And the war never finished because of the colonial wars that continued. And here we have Trump rattling his nuclear arsenal and threatening Putin and the world with a new Armageddon, a new nuclear Armageddon. We're going to take the power out of your hands. We're going to take the economic power out of your hands. We're going to take the weapons out of your hands and turn them into plowshares. We're going to create a world which is free from the threat of environmental destruction. We're going to create a planned and organized and democratic socialist society that will transform the world. That's a goal we're fighting for. Go for it.